one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in my life is the journey to growth starts within. And so I think if you're out there and you're looking around and, maybe you're blaming the company, maybe you're blaming the market, you know, maybe there's a whole bunch of different things that you may be attributing to your inability to grow. And, my mantra is like, if you are good with yourself, right, then all of these things will grow and evolve in the way that they're meant to be. But it's a really hard journey for a lot of people to really go within to understand, how do I get right with myself and comfortable in my own skin so that I can be the person that I want to be and be open, to the success that I know that I'm capable of.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script, but you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life. Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Ty Hammond. Today's guest is John Enns. John is a seasoned revenue executive and growth strategist with over 25 years of leadership driving scale across SaaS, cloud, and high-growth startups. As Vice President of Sales at Banyan Infrastructure and a graduate of Wharton's Chief Revenue Officer program, John blends strategic insight with operational rigor to deliver durable growth in dynamic markets. He's led teams from early stage to Series A and beyond, taking SetSail from 0 to 5 million annual recurring revenue and a 26 million Series A, and consistently builds systems that align people, process, and performance. Known for his calm clarity under pressure and his ability to turn potential into predictable outcomes, John focuses on sustainable revenue, strong culture, and leadership that compounds over time. It's my pleasure to have John on the show today. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you very much, Ty. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate that.
Fantastic. Starting off here always with this question. Every leader, every human being, of course, has experiences in life that influence who they become as a leader and as a human being well before they ever make it to any executive position of leadership. I'm curious, who is someone from your early life or an early experience that shaped the kind of leader and the person that you are today?
That's a great question. This might cause me to get a little bit teary-eyed, but very early on in my life, I had an older brother who was much older than me due to, a couple of different marriages, and he was the oldest, I was the youngest. And I ended up going to live with him for a period of time right after high school. And, I was raised in the Bay Area, for all intents and purposes, had a fairly cushy life, wanted for nothing and worked a lot when I was a kid, but ultimately moved, in with him at a certain period of my life because he wanted me to work construction with him. And I did that for about 8 months, and it brought us closer than we'd ever been, as you can imagine. And ultimately, it taught me the meaning of a hard day's work, because we worked hard. Right? I'm not going to lie. And it was just challenging. And I really struggled going from, kind of that protected mode into, almost a father-like, get out there and get it done. And, he wasn't a big, into I'm tired or I'm, or, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, we got to get up, we got to go, and we've got to build. And that was really meaningful. And I spent that time with him. And not very long after that, he passed away. And so I lost him. And I was blessed ultimately to spend that time, because the way that it happened that I got to be there was fairly random. And it's never like I set out to go live with my older brother, but it just happens, and things happen in my life where, that was the right move for me. And, and he just, the way that he conducted himself, with the people that worked for him, even me, he was tough and he had high expectations, but he was fair, right? And he would rib me just as much as he would give me a high five. And so, that was kind of the early stages of me just kind of really understanding, the type of person that I wanted to be. I wanted to get results, right? I wanted to be held accountable, but I also wanted to be, if somebody is successful, also their biggest advocate in their growth journey. And he was super helpful in doing that. And as I look back on that time with him, I don't think there's anything in my life that was more valuable than that time and those lessons that I learned.
Well, so much in there. First of all, it's bringing back my own memories of being on the job site with my father, who is a mason, and just knowing the culture of that. And I totally hear you when you say the stern and the high expectations, but the care
Yeah.
that can be within that. And obviously really formidable opportunity. I heard a lot about a work ethic in there too. I'm curious, what are the ways that you see that experience living through in the person that you become and the leader that you are today?
Well, so it laid the foundation, I would say. And then, it just, he instilled in me this idea that you could always evolve and get better and better and better, which led me to do things like read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Right. And so, at a very young age, in my 20s. And there's one particular segment in that book where you're at a funeral and, you see a lot of people that you know really well, and you're thinking that it's going to be somebody that's really close to you. So you're bracing yourself. And of course, because of what had happened with my brother, I was like, there was a lot of emotion in that moment. And you get up and it's you and you're dead. And it's like, okay, now what do you want people to say? Right. And, it was like, boom, 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 boom. I wrote all these things down. Um, and then the turn the page is like, now the hard part is like, what would they say about you now? And, being really honest with yourself. And then, ultimately like, hey, now you have a roadmap of how that you can conduct yourself and make decisions. And when I read through that passage, obviously it was emotional. I thought back of my brother and his mantra of, good, better, best. He used to say this to me all the time. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. And so that just drove me, right, to want to continue to evolve and get better. And, I was lucky to be back in the Bay Area and have some really great opportunities at the startup level, and had some really great outcomes where I just applied that work ethic and that drive to continue to better myself and to learn and grow. And that was rewarded, many times throughout my career. And then, so I would say like maybe towards the end, as I started getting into real leadership and managing larger teams, I just had that mentality of I want to take you as an individual, understand who you are right now, right? What you want to be, and do everything I can to help you get to that level that you want to be at, and to grow and evolve, and to really exceed your own expectations.
Well, I love that reflection. How do you want to be remembered really gets to that impact, not just the what do you want to accomplish, but how do you want to be remembered? It's really a good lead into my next question, which is, everybody, of course, has their own definition of true leadership. What does true leadership mean to you? What makes a true leader in your eyes?
So many things. I have a mantra, I would say that, early on in my career as a leader, I didn't do this so well. And then I evolved and trained and read and started learning about the concept of the whole person, right? To where, I was thinking about who you were when you walked through the door, or who when you logged in. And I wasn't really giving a lot of thought to who you were when you logged out, what was going on in your life, and really what you were trying to accomplish. Right. And so I transitioned to more of a, tell me a little bit about whatever you're comfortable with. I never, forced anybody to share anything, but I did communicate that I know what's happening in your personal life affects what's happening in your professional life. And we want to do everything we can to support you in your personal life, within reason, right? So that you can be the very best when you come and you're logging in and you're showing up to work on a daily basis. And I think that just that statement with a lot of people that have worked for me over the years was something they'd never heard before, right? But it was genuine because I really wanted to understand and I wanted to learn about what motivated them, right? And again, it goes back to what I learned earlier on with my brother. Like I really want to see people succeed, and I think with people, and I can use myself, as an example. I for the beginning of my career was my own worst enemy, and I was just limited in my thoughts and what I was capable of, right? And through continued evolvement, development, professional coaching to really break through. And so a lot of times what I'll tell my teams is the person that will hold you back the most in your life is the person that you stare at when you're brushing your teeth every morning, right? And so, I'm advocating like let's move beyond that. Let's work together to break that ceiling in what you're capable of. Because I'd love for you to walk away, and how whatever the time frame that we work together, looking back to in our time together as some of the most pivotal times in your life, as far as pushing yourself, right? Because going back to my bro, it's like I'm going to push you, and you're going to be annoyed with me, but I just want you to know that I'm going to understand everything that's going on in your life to whatever you're comfortable with so that I can push you at the right level and with the right timing and with the right empathy and support that makes you want to take that next step and de-risks it and eliminates some of the fear of where you want to go. And so to me, like that leadership is, circling back is I think that's really important to really get to know your people, have empathy, understanding, and really try to push them outside of their comfort zone and help them accomplish, meet or exceed, whatever they have set out to accomplish.
I really in your response there, I really get this sense of this is part of what I love so much about leadership, right? Is it's I ideally we care and nurture all of the relationships in our life, but boy, when we're talking about leadership, it is that care and nurture and relationships, and this like what I'm really getting and came through with your brother. It's like to push a little bit to accomplish something together, right? Not just to sort of hold each other, but like, hey, we're doing something together. That really comes through in your leadership style.
And if I may, just one other note is that it's really interesting when you take an interest in somebody's professional and personal development, right? And I hold people accountable. And I have to admit, like, sometimes it's bumpy, right? Because, generally all in our culture, people don't like to be held accountable. But I think I've mastered the art of holding people accountable in a way that's more motivational than negative, right? And, there's a lot of different ways that I do that. And it just is really interesting the initial phase, and then once they get into it, and I always think about, I don't know if you ever watched the movie Coach Carter, but he came in and he was disciplined, he was tough but fair, and accomplished really great things, right, in his life. And so I've been able to foster a lot of great long-term relationships with people I've worked with over the years just based on that strategy, and it fulfills me, right, a great deal.
Beautiful. Well, that accountability is something that I call the keystone agreement because, in my estimation, without accountability, no other agreement really has any power to it. So certainly understand that. And should we have a little more time, so that we could probably have an hour-long conversation on just that, and it would be fruitful for any listeners, I would imagine. But for now, I want to turn to this. This is one of my favorite questions because, of course, leadership and life, is shaped by fundamental turning points that we encounter along the way. These turning points can be a specific moment in time, or they can cover longer periods. But can you share about a time when you realized that your way of leading or living really no longer met the demands of work and life, and you really needed to grow beyond it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is, you were just discussing, I was thinking back. Yeah. So, as I was talking about the books that I'd read early on in my, the influence of my brother and these other, leaders, right? And, I started my own business, in my late 20s and had the blessing of a lot of great training and development and leadership at other companies I've been at. But, it's different from, knowing the path and walking the path, right? I stole that from the Matrix, right? And so, as I got into my business, and there was a lot of pressure, and it almost like that I completely forgot everything that I've learned, and I went into micromanagement mode because I'd been a very successful individual contributor. I've been a successful leader. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go do this on my own. But once it's all your responsibility, right? And, was fortunate enough to grow two offices, a team of 60. And, but I had less of the trying to understand the person and more of just grind, right? Just get in here, get to work. You were supposed to be here at this time. You're not there at that time. Like I was just more cynical and I was just more negative, quite frankly. And, had great teams, but I got a lot of feedback from my team that the way that I was managing them was not okay, right? Where all I did was ask for more and more and more. And yeah, I gave them a paycheck, and commissions, but they wanted something different and they wanted something more. And so there was some turnover, at my company in the sales and operations, and even the administrative. And I wasn't a lunatic or anything like that, but I was just set on growing my business and full focus. And I wasn't even thinking about the people around me. Right. And so, a couple of things happened where I lost a really good leader in the technology side, and had given me that feedback and I had heard it from other people, and that's really what kind of set me into professional coaching and then reading, because I'm like, this is not sustainable, right? Unless I evolve and I change and I start to understand what motivates people outside of just a paycheck, right? Then I'm probably going to be repeating the same cycles over and over again. And I'm happy to say that I did that. And that didn't happen overnight. That took, a year or two, to get that, but it completely changed my perspective, right? That's right around some of the, right before that, I had read the Seven Habits book, and I had moved away from, that stuff that I wanted to be known for, and remembered for, professionally. And it just kind of refocused me. Right. And, that guy leaving was like, a knock in the face with a 2x4 because he was critical to my operation. And the fact that I didn't see it coming and that it happened and that it was such a struggle, finding somebody else to fill those shoes, that really altered me. And I did a lot of self, um, thinking, looking internally and like, what can I do differently so this doesn't happen again? And how can I change? So that was the beginning of that process, right? And over the next couple of years, and quite frankly, I just had a lot more fun, right? It was more fulfilling, right? Where I was just constantly exhausted and running at 7 days a week at 100 miles an hour and expecting everybody else to do the same thing. And then there was another, as I was getting into professional coaching during that time, my coach was like, hey, you can't expect everybody that works for you to have the same passion and drive that you have as the owner of the company, right? You need to knock that down by like 30 to 40%. And that needs to be your new expectation, right? And your new measurement. So think about ways to make people feel appreciated at 60% of your 100%. And that was also another kind of pivotal moment for me where I was like, I was holding everybody to my standards, right? And that was wrong, right? Just flat out. There's no way that anybody's going to have as much passion, for my business as the person who owns the business and is running the business for themselves.
Absolutely. Well, I think you gave a little clue there. I know that we sort of skimmed past the accountability conversation, but so much of what you said in there and my sense of how it is that you are effective at holding other people accountable is because of the extent to which you have been accountable to yourself.
Correct.
In my experience, that is absolutely essential, and the willingness to go inside, to be honest, and to look. Oftentimes we get hit by that 2x4 in the head, and we we get mad at the 2x4.
Yeah.
But but really,
Being the best thing that ever happened to you, right?
yeah, exactly,
And all
exactly.
pain comes growth, right? Or theoretically.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And you've already mentioned, of course, coaching. This next question is a little bit about that, and perhaps it's coaching, but I want to ask it explicitly, because of course the kind of learning and growth, accountability, this leadership, this human journey that we're on requires a real commitment to growth. So what's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself for your own growth as a leader?
I think that combination, two things. I think personal therapy. Not that my childhood was horrible, but there were some things that happened, and with the passing of my brother, there were some things that I had never dealt with. Um, that I think as I got into therapy in my late 20s, and because I wanted to be this better person, and I wanted to be known more in the way that I'm known now than in the way that I was known for just being all about the business. And so, so really just stepping into a therapist office. Nobody had ever done that in my family. It must have been one of my friends. I can't even remember how I ended up. But that started myself, developing myself and holding myself accountable and trying to understand, what drove me and what I needed to heal, quite frankly, to become this person that I wanted to be. And so ultimately, and I still do it to this day. I still feel like it's something that I go and I do, and just to make sure, that I'm handling different things that come up in life, in the right possible way from a personal perspective, whether it's my children, what job I decide to take, or, where I want to invest my time and energy, um, in volunteering, and, just the different things I want to do in my life to make sure that I'm thinking about it in the right way. So it's always great to have somebody that's totally outside of your world that can just give you direct feedback, right? That doesn't really have a stake in the game. And so that opened me up to, and I had done some developmental training and worked with some coaches prior to that. And maybe that was kind of the groundwork as I think back on it now. But then ultimately after, any time that any of my company offered, professional coaching, I would take it in a heartbeat. Because again, and I've worked with some great folks over the years that, just perspective, right? We are limited by our own thoughts and our own experiences. And so it's really a lot of fun to get together with somebody who's had maybe completely different experiences professionally, right? And really be able to isolate, what's really what is the core of the issue, and how do you work around it, right? Or how do you make the decision to work through it? And I'll give you a great example. I was doing some work, back, and I won't name names, but I just had a CEO, who was a nice guy, but had never been a CEO before, and came from Google, lots of education, really super smart, but had never developed a platform before and never built a go-to-market machine. And I really struggled with him because he really was smart and he really liked to be the smartest guy in the room. And so sales 101 stuff that I would just go and do in any other situation was met with a lot of challenge and a lot of analysis paralysis. And it was really frustrating to me, in the early part of my time there. And so I was really struggling with, like, how do I deal with this guy in a way that's going to be productive? Right. And so in conversation with my coach, I'm like, I'll never forget, it was a woman, and she said, do you really want to let, because, all the things are like, should I just quit? Should I just move on? Like, how can I do what I need to do? And she's like, are you really going to let this individual stop you from doing what you do and being successful? Right. This is just another opportunity for you to learn. how to deal with a difficult personality. This is great experience for you, right? And so we put a plan together and we executed that plan, and we had an incredible outcome in that situation. And I won't get into details because I don't want to cause anybody any undue burden, but it was just such a growth experience for me to where I'm just going to focus on what I can control, right? And I'm going to do what I do best, and the rest will come. And if I got to deal with a difficult personality, I'm just going to do everything I can, right, to make it positive, and that's what I did. And so, that professional coaching really helped me in that situation. So, I'm always going to be recommending, Ty, personal therapy, working with somebody, and then also, working with the professional coach, which is more along the lines, it's a combination of therapy, but a combination of what can I do in this particular moment from a business perspective to get to the outcome that we all want to get to.
Boy, so much of that, and absolutely can support having those different perspectives in whatever ways that they come. But boy, I just really hear that wisdom, and I think this is so much it, right? Learning how to see the difficulties in life, not something that is there to stop us, but to teach us.
That's right.
And boy, that really comes through when somebody's done that inner work, right? Because we could spend all day fighting the teaching,
Yeah,
or we can learn from it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and in the software startup world, there's lots of time to learn.
Oh yeah. Fair enough.
So, you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, full of difficulty, full of opportunities for growth, and how we navigate that.
the last thing I'll say is that in that process that we've, started our journey in this conversation, I want to just add one thing is that there was also a time in my life where I realized that I didn't have to be the smartest person in the room, right? And that a strength and a leadership trait is listening, right? And really listening to what other people are saying, right? And taking in different perspectives and really weighing them as important as your own perspectives, right? And that has just helped me flourish as a leader and working with other groups and within the organization, to where earlier on in my career I thought, I thought I knew it all. And once I realized that I don't really know much and that I have a huge opportunity to learn from other people, everything changed.
Well, I bet. I'm curious. In a little bit of your responses earlier, we're talking about some of the things that you wanted to do. This next question is a little more forward focused. What's your vision for your leadership, your legacy, or the impact that you would like to have in the years ahead?
I would say that, I want to build something, professionally, I would say I want to build something, um, I think, bigger and more impactful, right? So I think about my opportunity where I'm at right now. I'm in the renewable energy space. And one of the reasons I took this role was that my impact, if we are, continue to be successful, will be, for all intents and purposes, the unlocking of capital investment into renewable energy, right? And so the bigger picture there is, for me, is maybe I can have some small impact on the way, that our country consumes energy and distributes and creates and distributes energy. And so that's a big part of it as well. But whether that's here or somewhere else, right? I want to be impactful, whatever I'm doing. I want to solve real business problems, and I want to build a team, right? That's I think about, revenue definitely drives me, and I can put, a revenue system in place. I know how to go and find revenue, but where I really enjoy my time is hiring, developing, and growing individuals. And I would love to be able to do that at scale, again. And that opportunity might present itself here at Banyan. But, if it doesn't, then maybe in the future, really searching for that opportunity where I can go and scale something again and be a part of something, that gets back to, an acquisition or an IPO, again. And because in those times in my career, when you have that vehicle, it's a lot of fun and you get access to a lot of really great people that are looking to grow and to learn and to move up in their careers. And it's just a lot of fun.
Considering what you're wanting to shape and do in the future, and considering, your current, let's say, leadership experience,
Mm-hmm.
where do you feel most tested right now? What are the challenges that are stretching you the most? What are the ways that you feel like you most need to grow to meet today's challenges and to really be ready to fulfill on that vision for your leadership in your life?
That's a great question. Let me think about that for a second. I would say in my current role, um, there's been, I'm always focused on things that I can control, right? But sometimes there's things that you can't control that have an impact on things that you can control. And so I think patience, right, is something that I'm working on right now because I want to be successful yesterday. And successful, I mean, I want to grow and I want to add people and build. And, over the last year, there was with the new administration coming in and their position on renewable energy hasn't really stopped us from meeting the numbers, but the growth that I was looking for in 2025 and 2026, I think I had to reassess, right? And be rethinking. Again, still lots of opportunity, right? But I just had to be like, I wanted to be further down the road. And so I think that just patience, right? That everything that I'm learning now is part of the learning journey, and to just keep doing the things, right? And that I'm doing, and to focus on the things that I can control. And that will come, right? Will it come in 2 years or 1 year, right? I wanted it last year, right? And so that's where I'm really being challenged right now in my role, is to just be patient. There's lots of wonderful signs. You know how sometimes you get into a situation, you're like, oh, this happened, and you can sometimes spiral into kind of negative thinking around this one or two things when there's 700 other things that are actually going really well, right? But you're so focused on these one or two things. And so, that's part of the patience and just making sure, right, that I don't lock too quickly into things that are going wrong when so many things are going right.
I really sense, I don't know if you'd agree here, but the older and whatever wiser I get, the slower I am looking to take things. I really
Yep.
am quite amazed actually at the actual pace of growth. The comparison between where I'd like things to be
Mhm.
as compared to where they actually are, and the way that they want to emerge. So I think there's so much wisdom in that. This last question is less of a question than it is an invitation. You have the
Mhm.
time and the space here to offer to our listeners whatever it is that's most in your mind and heart to share right now based on the conversation that we've been having. Anything at all, take the time, take your time. The floor is yours.
I think I have one. So, I would say one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in my life is the journey to growth starts within, right? And so I think if you're out there and you're looking around and, maybe you're blaming the company, maybe you're blaming the market, you know, maybe there's a whole bunch of different things that you may be attributing to your inability to grow. And I would say that that is probably the best advice that I can give. And I have two teenagers, and we talk about this all the time, right? There's friends and there's sports, and there's all these things that happen in those worlds. And my mantra is like, if you are good with yourself, right, then all of these things will grow and evolve in the way that they're meant to be. But it's a really hard journey for a lot of people to really go within to understand, how do I get right with myself and comfortable in my own skin so that I can be the person that I want to be, and be open, to the success that I know that I'm capable of. And so that correlates to, you are your own worst enemy, right? And to just to try to understand that in a positive way, right? To not limit yourself based on your experiences, right? Your upbringing, what professional experiences you may have had. And this shows itself daily in the work that I do with my team, where, one individual may think that it's just absolutely nuts that I would reach out to, a senior level executive, right? To just get an understanding of how they're feeling about the value and the budget, right? And then it just happens because I'm just comfortable there. But I wasn't always comfortable there, right? It took me saying, what's the worst that could happen? Right. And then finally realizing that, hey, CEOs like to be kept in the loop and they really do want to know what's happening. And just, but nobody pushed me to do that, and so I'm saying push yourself, to do uncomfortable things. Right. One of my managers years ago, and this is a common theme, but he's like, you got to be uncomfortable, or you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And really pushing yourself. And I think that, when you look at in our world, the leaders and even the individual contributors that, do really well, they all have that trait of like, for the most part, they know who they are, they know what they're capable of. And, they're to a certain point, like fearless. They're constantly pushing the envelope and taking risks on themselves, right? To accomplish these amazing things. And so I guess the takeaway, Ty, is don't limit yourself, right? Push yourself to embrace the discomfort, and you'll get to levels in your career, but also in your personal life that you may never. I mean, it really is where most of us want to be. We just don't really know how to get there.
Well, John, I appreciate so much the wisdom that you've shared here today with me. I've really gotten so much out of it, and I am sure that whoever listens here is equally going to benefit from what you've shared. Thank you so much for being my guest on the True Leadership Podcast.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Ty, for having me. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Equally. That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.